Kia ora and welcome to How to Smash the Motherhood Penalty, the podcast where we get curious about a system where all parents pay some kind of a price, but it's only mothers that are paying a financial price. I'm your host, Emma McLean. I'm an executive coach and a mum of three. Join me as I interview experts in all different fields on what the motherhood penalty is, how it impacts us, and what we can do to smash it. Welcome back, it's your friend Emma. Today I am delighted to introduce Stephanie Pow. Stephanie is a mum of two and the founder of Crayon, a startup on a mission to reduce financial stress in the moments that matter most. One of those moments is welcoming a child, and Crayon is best known for creating the New Zealand Parental Leave Register. And I know many of my listeners will know about the Parental Leave Register. It is a very well-loved and great tool that creates transparency. So I know that I just want to say thank you on behalf of parents on that, Stephanie. Stephanie's inspiration for Crayon came from her personal experience, as all great businesses do. When Stephanie became a mum, she discovered the unique financial puzzles that new parents face and are often woefully underprepared for. Now Crayon partners with leading employers to provide financial care and coaching to expecting parents, which is epic. I have known Stephanie for a while. We've been on a panel together. We've been on drinks together. I mean, there's a lot of things we've done together, and I really have admired Stephanie in how she has approached building her business, because I think she has been very grounded in the problems that working parents face. And I think that if you're going to start a business, you need to solve problems. So I acknowledge her for that. And I'm just going to say welcome, Stephanie, and please feel free to add anything else to that introduction. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. I feel like I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller to your podcast, so delighted to be here today. And thank you very much for the generous introduction. For me, when I look back at the origin of Crayon, I have a background in finance. It's what I studied undergrad. It's what I worked in. I used to be an investment banker. So I really have no excuse. Yet when I had my first child, Louisa, who's now 6, I discovered the hard way just how many things I didn't know about. You know, people don't tell you about the big financial implications you wear, particularly as a mother or a primary carer. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have made such different decisions. And that's what I'm really passionate about for parents and for finances more broadly. You know, at the top of the intro, you mentioned we're on a mission to reduce financial stress in the moments that matter. Parental leave is one of those, but also not the only one that affects many of us.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, right? You were in finance and this is hard, and I think that's so true, right? It's like, even for people who you think, oh, well, they must be all over this, it is still hard. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about these conversations. We don't think about some of the things that are the things we really need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. You know, often when you find out a friend is expecting, you might talk about what pram to get or, what a birth plan might look like, which, by the way, often doesn't go to plan, as was the case for me. But we don't often say, hey, have you checked your employer's parental leave policy? Or if you have a partner, what are they getting? Or do you know what your government entitlements are? Or how annual leave works after you've taken parental leave? Or, have you looked into childcare yet? And, it's quite expensive. And do you know what you're eligible for? All of those things that are really critical for you just to actually relax and enjoy your parental leave and to be able to return to the workforce if that's what you choose to do or you need to do afterwards, and to do that well. The earlier, and you would see this in your coaching, Emma, the earlier you front foot these conversations, the better set up you are for the rest of it.
Yeah, I love it. For those of you who've never seen the New Zealand Parental Leave Register, could you tell me what it is?
Absolutely. So it now houses over 300 verified parental leave policies from employers across New Zealand. And what sparked this for me is when you look at the financial aspects of becoming a parent, what support you get from your employer makes a big difference here. Yet it's something that's really awkward to ask about. If you're going for a job, a lot of us wouldn't feel comfortable saying, "So, what's your parental
Yeah.
leave policy here?" Or even if you're in your current role, but you can't easily find the policy. Sometimes these things are buried on the internet that nobody uses, or in fact, not on the internet at all, and you've got to ask the HR or P&C team, etc. Again, you might not be ready to say to your manager, "I'm thinking about having a family. How do we support families here?" Because, and you would have seen this potentially with some of your clients, but there is a well-documented phenomenon, or a fear really, that if I let people know I'm thinking about having a child, then they're going to not give me the job, or not give me the exciting opportunity, or not give me the promotion. So, people are understandably a bit hesitant about sharing news. Plus, you don't know how soon you might
Mm,
have a child. And so for all
mm,
those reasons, it's really hard to ask about, but it's such critical information to have on hand so that
mm,
you can plan your personal finances and not
mm.
be stressed when you're on parental leave. In New
Yeah.
Zealand, 70% of mums take less parental leave than they want to, and about 50% end up going back to work sooner than they thought. Now, sometimes that is because they want to go back, but actually a lot of the times money pressures, particularly with mortgage rates, at least in the last couple of years, it jumped quite high. Now it's coming down a bit, but cost of living more broadly is going up. A lot of people feel like they need to go back early. And so the information you have about what your entitlements are, and how you and your partner, if you have one, share those entitlements, etc., is really, really important. And so that was the inspiration for the register. For us, we've been really fortunate to have a lot of support from the employer community. All our policies are verified because it's important to me that the person using the register can be confident in the information. That means we work one-to-one with about 3/4 of the employers on our register to get the information. We're just going through the process now of our annual checks to say, has anything changed, and to make sure we have the latest and greatest on there. And then the remaining 25% come from publicly verified sources that we can be confident. Collective agreements on the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health website. Or we did OIA, which is the Official Information Act. We've done over
Wow.
100 OIAs to go out there and ask ministries and crown entities, etc., what their policies are, and we're working
Mm.
through that to document that. And so we want to make sure there's a good spread of employers, and also that their information is trustworthy.
Amazing. Amazing. What an amazing resource that is for free, right? Like, is
Absolutely. It's free
this,
for
yeah.
employers to join. It's free for people to access. We don't want any barriers on there. And we're really clear that we're not here to rank or rate employers. We have employers on the register that offer the statutory entitlements, and we celebrate them just as much as we celebrate
Mm,
employers who join with a top of market type of policy, because the aim of the game here is transparency. We want to get every
mm,
employer in New Zealand on the
mm,
register. This is not
mm,
about rating or ranking them. And honestly, now that I've looked at so many parental leave policies, I often get asked, well, what's the best one? That's something like, when people find out this is what we do. And the honest answer is it's hard to say, because there are lots of dimensions to a parental leave policy. Back in the day, it used to be, oh, how much paid primary carer leave is there? And that's about it. These days, it's not just paid primary carers leave, there's also paid partners leave, there's what happens to KiwiSaver, annual leave, and some of the non-monetary ways employers support their people on the way, transitioning in or out, etc. What happens when things don't go to plan? What happens if family formation looks a bit different for you, etc. There's a lot of richness within a policy. And even in the couple of years that we've been doing this, or the 6 years since I had my first kid, the employer landscape has changed a lot. Often we will see policies with quite new dates on them, which is exciting, whether it's a new policy or an update. So it is something that is continuing to evolve, and we do monitor the trends in this space.
mm,
But I think it's important for people to realize there's quite a lot. And also eligibility criteria. That matters
mm.
too. What type of contract do you need to be on? Do you need to have been at the employer for a certain amount of time before you can qualify? Is there bonding or clawback if you decide that you don't want to return to your employer, or you return and it's just not working for you and you need to leave soon after? Are you on the hook for paying back any of that? All of that is important information to know.
Oh, you've sidetracked me now about those clawbacks and contract and parental leave things, because I've got a question for you. You might not be able to answer it. Do employers ever enact that?
We don't hear too much about that.
Yeah.
And look, I think it's, for a lot of employers, it's a
Is
bit...
it common anymore? Like this, so yeah, this idea that we will give you 6 months paid parental leave, but if you leave within 2 years, you have to pay that back in full. Is that kind of like a clause that might occur?
Yes, and sometimes it will be, do you need to pay it in full or pro rata? And how long
Ah,
is that
okay.
clawback? So let's say you have a
Yeah.
12-month clawback, but you leave 6 months into it. Are you on the hook for all of it or just half of it because you've at least worked
Yeah.
6 months? So that can vary. Clawbacks are still not that common across all the policies on our register. 40% have either clawback or bonding. So it will either be what we talked about, which is an
Wow.
employer will
40%.
recoup some of it, or an employer will hold up some or all of the payment until you are back at work. So it's almost a return to work incentive rather than a parental leave payment. And so it's still somewhat common, and that's why it's really important for people to know what's involved in what they're signing up for. And if you think about it, Emma, if you have a employer's policy that has a 12-month qualifying criteria, you want to take 12 months of parental leave and there's a 12-month clawback, and also say you need to be there for another 12 months to take it again if you want another kid. Then if you want 2 kids, you're actually signing up for a 5-year commitment with that employer. And so you do want to know, it's great that employers have these policies, but you also want to read the T's and C's here.
Totally. Totally. And controversially, shout out to that 40% of employers that have clawbacks or bonding requirements. What if someone actually just like actually wanted to stay with your organization? Like, what if we created an environment that people wanted to be in, that you didn't have to threaten them with a financial penalty if they left? That's the thing. I actually presented to an industry body some time ago, and I discovered that most, if not all, of their parental leave policies had clawbacks in them. And it just for me is a different mindset around parents if you have that, because it's kind of like we're doing you a massive favor, and so we need to get our money's worth, as opposed to creating workplaces that work for everyone, or creating workplaces where parents want to be part of. They're not forced to stay there because they're bonded for 2 years. I feel like that creates problems, but
Yeah,
that's it.
it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I could see when you go to a board and you say it's going to cost this much to do a policy, it's probably one of those things that makes it a bit more palatable from a financial perspective. But I agree with you, Emma, which is you want people who want to be there in your
This is
organization.
the
I think
thing.
it's also hard if you've got someone who is not having a great time of it, might be struggling within their role, struggling with parenthood. Also, if their personal circumstances change, etc. I think that's really tough, and also potentially doesn't create the best environment, right? If someone
Yeah.
really doesn't want to be there,
No.
and and if I were an employer and I had a lot of people not coming back, I think that would be a good reason to investigate what's going on here and what do
Yeah.
we need to do
Or
to
everyone leaving at the 2 year mark or something like that.
what do we need to do to make sure people are thriving in this environment?
One observation I want to share with you: when you first launched the Parental Leave Register, which I love to hear, is I was talking to a potential large-ish business, and I remember that they had received an email from you sort of saying, we're launching this Parental Leave Register, and, would you be keen on coming into it, and do you want to send us through your parental leave policy? And it was something like, I mean, it's not exactly this, but the person leaned out their office and yelled down the hall, do we have a parental leave policy? So I just want to acknowledge you, because I feel like just for this register being in existence, it has created this question in a lot of employers. Yeah, what is our policy? Do we have one? Where is it? How do we talk about it?
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's awesome to hear, which is it generates some conversation around
Yeah,
what do we do here. I know you and I are both big fans of asking questions,
yeah,
and that often just stimulating the next part of that conversation.
yeah, I love that. How do you think the parental leave register smashes the motherhood penalty? Where do you think it fits in that equation?
What's the saying? Is it forearmed and therefore forewarned? or forewarned and therefore forearmed. You've
Yep.
got the information so you can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
And I come at this with a financial hat, and so often a primary carer is taking a big financial hit during parental leave. Paid parental leave in New Zealand, we get 26 weeks. Right now it's paid at a cap of up to $788.66 per week before tax and KiwiSaver, etc. And that's less than full-time minimum wage. So for a lot of primary carers and mothers, they're taking a reasonable financial hit. And certainly this, if you take the full 12 months, the second 6 months is unpaid. And so for me, it's having that information to be able to make good decisions with both your career and your personal finances. And look, you might discover that your employer or your prospective employer doesn't have any enhancements or limited enhancements and still choose to go there because it's an exciting opportunity for you and it's a great growth opportunity, etc. That could still be the right decision, but it just might mean that you more diligent saver and you make different adjustments ahead of time so that when you go on parental leave, you're not financially stressed out and you can actually enjoy or at least be present with your child. And so I think that's a big part of it. Also, we're seeing more and more employers offer paid partners leave. And anyone who talks to me about parental leave knows that one of my big bugbears in New Zealand is that we are one of 3 developed countries with no paid partners leave. We are right at the bottom of the heap. And that really tells a lot of fathers and partners that in a way they're optional, right? And they're really not. You and I both know that they're not. And you do so much work in this space. And so we're seeing more employers step up in that respect. And in fact, we have some policies that don't offer any paid primary carers leave, but do offer paid partners leave, recognizing that there's nothing for partners under the legislation. Right now, if you're a partner, depending on how long you've been at your employer, the max you can get is 2 weeks unpaid. And MIMBI, which is the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, found that utilization is about 4%. Because the reality is most families cannot survive with one person earning less than full-time minimum wage and someone earning nothing, right? Even for a couple of weeks. 30% of New Zealanders live paycheck to paycheck. And so what ends up happening is a lot of partners and dads cobble together time in lieu, annual leave, sometimes sick leave, whatever paid leave they can get to get a few days or a couple of weeks at home, when really a lot of the research shows that fathers and partners want to spend more time at home, want to be more present, both around the time that, as a couple, you welcome your baby or you adopt, surrogacy, etc. And also when the mother or primary carer goes back to work. I do a lot of financial coaching with couples one-on-one, and a trend I'm seeing is more dads and partners wanting to be sole charge, particularly after the mother and primary carer goes back to work. And one of my favorite statistics, there's a whole body of research about all the benefits of fathers taking parental leave, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with a lot of it. But one of my favorite stats is that in Sweden, where they have much better government provisions for this, they found that for every month a father takes off parental leave, and this is for a heterosexual couple, when they look at the mother's earnings 4 years down the track, hers are 6.7% higher. That's for every month, right? And that's because she's much better supported into work. They've got better distribution of unpaid work at home. All of that, you can measure that. And that there's also fascinating research around how they've done brain scans of dads who take meaningful amounts of parental leave and those who don't, and their neural pathways are different. The idea that I think a lot of mums also feel you learn to be a good caregiver. It's not something you're born with. You just do it enough times that you get better at it. That's true for dads too. Bonding between the father and the child, the strength of the relationship, all sorts of stuff. There's a huge body of research about how important that is. I could talk about it for a very long time, but
I like you talking about it because I talk about it, but I don't have any numbers that back me up. And you have a lot of numbers, and so I love it. Coming back to the beginning of what I heard you say, just so that everyone is clear on this, in terms of partner leave in New Zealand, we are one of 3 countries
3 developed
in the
countries.
world. One of 3 developed countries in the world that does not offer paid partner leave.
That's correct.
Who are the other 2 countries?
USA and Israel.
Yeah. So, next year, it's an election year. talk to your MP, right? Like, I mean, for all the benefits that Stephanie has just talked about, it raises women's income. It's better for dads. It's a slot machine of winning. It's a slot machine of winning.
Absolutely. And it's better, you think about, there's so much research now on the first 1,000 days being so critical for children. And that 1,000 day, the clock is kind of from pregnancy to age 2. And it's about brain development and how much of what happens in that time period can influence lifelong outcomes, right? And, I think we should see this as an investment. We are a services economy. I think over 70% of our GDP comes from services, and services rely on people. And so we need to invest, even see it as an investment in the younger generation coming through. That's so critical too.
Totally. I totally agree. Well, we're in violent agreement on that. So we'll just get the government to come back to us and we can influence them in whatever way they need to. What about you and the motherhood penalty? I ask all my guests who are parents and who are mothers, I kind of say, when you reflect on your career to date, do you think you've paid the motherhood penalty?
Yes, I think I have. I remember one book I read before I had my children was What Works for Women Who Work. I don't know if you've come across this one.
I haven't heard that. Well, yeah, no.
And what I really liked about it is a lot of the books out there for career women talk about what you need to do differently, right? About, you need to speak up more, you need to do this. And what resonated with me about this book is it's about, you call it the soup we're all swimming in, right? What are the structural and institutional reasons some of these things exist? And they have 4 big chapters, and one of them is on the motherhood penalty. And I read it before I became a mum. And I remember somewhat naively thinking, well, I've worked really hard, I've studied really hard, got good degrees. Surely I'll be all right. It won't apply to me. Obviously very ignorant. And I realized after I became a mum, and now I have 2 young kids who are 6 and 4, that it is so much about the structure out there. And so for me, I work full time on Crayon. My husband works full time in the finance industry. It is still a very traditional industry. It's 5 days a week at the desk. There is a little bit of flexibility before even he needs to go in a bit later or leave a little bit earlier on some days, but it's an intense role that's 10 to 12 hours a day at a desk, right? And actually today he's currently traveling for work for the week. So in a way, because I work for myself, I have the flexibility, right? I have the flexibility to do school. I think the other thing that surprised me is when kids start school, you think, oh gosh, they're off. But actually school can require quite a bit of you that you just don't realize. Actually, when they're at daycare or kindy, it's a lot less of a lift as a parent than when they're at school, whether that's the hours of school or just the number of things that are on at school that obviously are optional, but I do want to be, or that our daughter wants us to be there for. So I think that's where I really feel it is, when you've got someone in a role that's very traditional and fixed, and then you've got someone in a role that's very flexible, the distribution of that is frankly very tricky. And one of the things I want to acknowledge is that we pay for help, right? Or we try and outsource some of it, and that is the reality of making our lives work. And we're in a position we can do that, and I'm very grateful for that. And I recognize that's not a position everybody's in. I don't have any family of my own in New Zealand. I'm from Australia, so I don't have my parents or siblings or extended family around me either. And my husband's family is all still working, and they're busy. They've got their own lives, and they help where they can. But the reality is we've been able to make it work because we have to get outside help.
Wow. Thank you for sharing a little of your story, Stephanie, because I know so many people will have found that useful. What I really want to acknowledge in it is your reflections. Like, you read about this before and you were like, yeah. No, doesn't apply to me. I'm clever. I've got degrees. But, when you reflect on this, what I love about your reflection, and I wish everyone to take away, is this is not a statement on you or your husband, right? This is a statement on the structure we are all working within. As I say, the soup that we are all swimming in, that it's not designed for it, right? So I do think, like, I paid the motherhood penalty and as well, and it's kind of framed up sometimes as a choice we made or as something that I kind of wanted. But, and at the time, maybe I would agree with that. But I don't think these are choices. We run out of choices, I think, particularly when people start school.
Yes, and it reminds me a lot of that research by Claudia Golden.
Yeah.
She won the Nobel Prize for this. She talks about some jobs being greedy work, and not greedy in the financial sense, but greedy in the time sense, or the fact that you are paid disproportionately more on an hourly rate basis for roles that require a lot more for you, or that are more unpredictable, or have longer hours, etc. And I think that does play true in quite a few industries still.
Yeah. I love that word unpredictable because if you want to have one word that describes having children, it's unpredictable. And I think that's the thing that often career driven, focused, dual career heterosexual couples struggle with a lot because they may have built their career on a lot of controllable, predictable things. And then you get this completely unpredictable thing that can get sick, that cannot sleep all night. And it's really hard. We're not prepared for it.
No, and everyone keeps telling me bigger kids, bigger problems, but maybe or bigger kids, different problems, right? It doesn't just go away once they start sleeping through the night. There's different things, and you have teenagers now, right, Emma? So I'm sure you can firsthand that, and it's coming for me, right? But it's not that they need less of me; they just need me in a different way as they
Yeah,
get older.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so this stuff is complicated. In your work running Crayon, because I know you do a number of different services that you partner with employers on, what would you wish for employers to do to better support all parents? What are some of the things they can be doing?
Oh, how much time do you have, Emma?
I've got you've got the mic. You've got the mic.
Look, I think first of all, it is much more of a topic of conversation than it was maybe 5 years or even 10 years ago, which is good, right? People are talking about it and recognizing that parental leave isn't just a period of time that you take away from a role, but it's a huge transition in your life. So that's the first bit. It's just recognizing the weight of or the significance of that life event. The second is, and I touched on it a bit earlier with the policy side, but really seeing it as that journey. Again, not just about throwing more money at the problems per se, or giving, which is important, paid leave, don't get me wrong, but recognizing sometimes there are things you can do around what it looks like to keep in touch or what it looks like to return to work. And I think that's actually one of the trickiest parts in a parental leave journey, is actually coming back to work. And you would see this much more deeply than I do, right? Working with your clients, but particularly around that return to work part. And we're seeing coaching, which is great, being formalized in policy, but also, REM reviews. What happens when you go on parental leave? Do you still get your REM review? What about when you come back, and how does that work? And you know, a lot of the support, or the next wave of it, I think needs to be around the career side, not just the 12 months someone has on parental leave. Because what happens when someone comes back? There's research showing that people make assumptions around, particularly women, their commitment to a role and their ability to do that role after they've become a mother. It's very well documented research. In fact, they had one example where they sent out CVs that were fictional and identical, save for the fact that one made it clear someone was a mum and the other didn't. And the one that made it clear was a mum got far fewer callbacks. And even with AI screening, I think NYU researchers found that CVs, or the screening services, will screen out CVs where someone makes it clear that they've taken a break to be a mum, etc. So that I guess is translating even in an AI world. So around the part of how do we help people come back in and do really well and have very clear conversations around, okay, you're a parent now. What does your life need to look like, whether you're a mum or a dad, so you can do well? And what do you want out of your role and career here? And where can we support you? But also, what are the opportunities that are coming up next for you? That's one. I think the second part is around, a lot of mums can or want to take a career break and be there for those early years, which I think is a great life choice. But that doesn't mean they necessarily want to be a full-time parent for the whole time. What if they want to come back to work when kids start school or their kids get a bit older? What does that on-ramp look like? I don't think we're very good yet at recognizing all the skills someone gains from being a parent, whether it's a mum or a dad, if they've taken a couple of years plus out, how do we bring them back into an
Yeah.
organization? And
Mm.
what does that look like? I think that would love to see much more conversation and structure around that, because it's hard. If you've been out of the workforce for a long period of time, you probably don't feel particularly confident. The world's changing really quickly, especially in an AI driven world. And
Yeah.
so but yet there's so much to offer there. So how do we harness that and make the most of that?
Yeah, I love all those ideas. That latter one, it feels like offering returnships, which some employers do, but they're actually often focused on the technical areas of a business, so IT or digital. And to your point, AI is woven through everything now. You only have to be out for 2 years to think you're already behind the eight ball, and it really impacts your confidence. But what if we reboarded, we offered returnships, we actually helped them on ramp themselves back into work? Because, if you've had a 20-year career, being out for 2 years doesn't mean you're on the heap. Like you've still got a lot to contribute.
Absolutely. And you've also probably learnt a lot in that two
Mm.
years, recognizing the skills that you get from being a full-time parent. I think that's one of
Yeah.
the hardest jobs in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I loved your idea, your thinking around, what happens when people are on parental leave and what happens with remuneration reviews. And I would also add to that, it's very common for restructures to happen while you're on parental leave, opportunities for promotion because of it, reapplying for jobs. I really think that employers can play a great role by really considering about people who are on parental leave during this time and having a deliberate approach to it rather than leaving it up to the people leaders. Because when you have inconsistent approaches around this stuff, it's actually can be really damaging.
Yeah, I haven't seen any New Zealand specific stats, but over in Australia, a report, I think it was last year or the year before, found that 1 in 5 women who went on parental leave, were made redundant or lost their role at some point of that parental leave journey. So it does happen quite a bit. I think it's a bit of an out of sight, out of mind. You have a think about it. In no other, no other regular circumstance does someone else come in and do your role for you, or is your role divided up and given to other people? I mean, what a test to be put under in a way.
Yeah, totally. And I get this is hard for employers. I get it is. And you can do hard things, but you're probably going to have to change what you're doing. Like this is hard creating parental leave cover. And, it's all about how we value the work. What is the work of a parent? What is the work of bringing a new taxpayer into the world? How do we value that? Because some mums get penalised for it. They don't get valued.
And I think you're right. A lot of it, we get to talk to a lot of employers in the work that we do, and a lot of them are trying to do the right thing and are trying to do it. Is just really difficult.
It's really difficult, but that doesn't mean we don't do it. We just keep forging ahead into difficult things.
I also think it's such a wonderful opportunity to create loyalty. When you
Yeah.
look at it that way, I was chatting to someone else the other day who had 3 kids with one of the largest employers in New Zealand and was really well taken care of each time. And her kids are now adults. And she was still talking about how, what a great employer they are. And, she stayed with
Yeah.
them for a number of years and took
Yeah.
different roles. But, that stays with people.
And also, if you're a clever employer and you're thinking about your employer brand, and I know that it's a difficult market at the moment and people may not have to invest in their employer brand as much, but these parents have these inbuilt communities that they're going to share stories with, aren't they? They're going to have their coffee groups that they're going to talk about stuff. And anything you can do that helps a parent to feel seen, either on parental leave or returning from parental leave, is going to be a story that's talked about. And that's what brands want. That's what, like just a shout out to one of my clients, which is One New Zealand. They do a number of things for their parents coming back from parental leave. But I was running a workshop the other day and one of the parents said, oh, well, we get a week's worth of free meals when we come back to work. And I really appreciated them. Like it made a real difference to my first week. And then another parent said, well, I my manager has strongly encouraged and supported me to attend this course. And I felt like I didn't have the time, but they really said, I'll do whatever I need to make sure you get this time for yourself. And both those things, they're going to tell people about that, you know?
Absolutely. And the flip side is also true.
Yep. Totally. So they're a ripe audience, people. Create great experiences and they'll talk about them. Create bad experiences, they'll also talk about them. We could talk for a long time, Steph.
We could.
I love it. My final question is, because you've listened to the podcast before, but everyone gets a magic wand because I do live in a magic kingdom. If you had a magic wand and you could do one thing to smash this system that creates a motherhood penalty, which is an up to 60% penalty on your salary over 10 years for a mum, what would you use it for? What lever or what thing do you think would have the biggest impact?
Paid partners leave. I think that would have the biggest impact in New Zealand.
Tell me what makes you say that?
For me, both parents are super valuable and important in those early days. And right now, because of the legislation, 95% plus of primary carers, or at least the people who take paid parental leave from the government, are women, right? Less than 2 to 3% is transferred from one parent to the other. So the reality is most fathers and partners don't have access to any paid leave. And as we touched on it in this conversation, I think that's a critical part to rebalancing the unpaid work that gets done at home, and frankly how a couple splits that and how each person is supported back into work if that's what they choose to do. And so for me, I think you've touched on it before, when we've been on panels, right? That, yep, women got the memo that they can break into the workplace, but men didn't really get the memo that they could break in at home. And I think a big part of what would enable that is giving men and fathers and partners meaningful amount of parental leave so that you can be there in those hairy first few weeks, which are very tough, but also have the opportunity to take sole charge at some point in that parental leave journey.
To tuku that, because it's a magic wand and you've used this word, meaningful periods of paid partner leave, give me your magic wand. How many weeks/years would you like a partner to be paid?
I'd like to see equal paid parental leave across primary carers and partners. So let's call it 26 weeks each. I know that's not what's going to be what is the first cab off the rank here in New Zealand. So a more realistic number to me is 6 weeks. That's where I want to see the legislation start. And, paid parental leave for the primary carer, that's also increased over time. We didn't start at 26 weeks.
Yeah.
We worked on that over almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
So let's start at 6, because
I love that. Steph's a kind magic wand user. She's like, no, I'm going to be a realistic magic wand
That's right.
person.
Yeah, I think, next election, I would love to see 6 weeks on the card.
Yes, so would I. And also I love your take on that, which would be maybe flexibility to use 2 weeks right at the start, when everyone's recovering and there's all the milk drunk smiles. And then actually, I see this with a number of my clients, that when the mum goes back to work, the dad takes 4 weeks of sole charge just to kind of ease the transition. And I think that's a really good way, if you do have that leave, to use it. And so I really love that you're using that. And I was thinking about how you said, when you think about it, distributing your work out when you're not at work, when you're on parental leave, is a really strange thing to do. When you also think about it, ranking parents into primary and secondary is also a really strange thing to do. I would imagine before you had children, we would embrace this word of partner. We would probably embrace a concept of equity. And the system ranks us into important, not important. As Norma Barrett, who I interviewed, said, driver, passenger. I mean, you use it as well, like not important. And so we need to start reimagining the system, don't we?
Absolutely. I was talking to an employee the other day and they actually called it co-parent leave rather than secondary carer or partner's leave, which I thought was
Yeah.
quite an interesting term to use. And I do believe words matter for things like this because they really tell people what their role is.
I love it. And I know, so I'm going to leave it there because we could just go on. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you for being so articulate with this. I know so many people will have got a different take on the motherhood penalty from this conversation. Thank you for your work. Thank you for starting Crayon, because I know that it's not easy to start a business. I know that at a time when finances are really tight, having a startup is hard. So I want to acknowledge that as well. Thank you very much. I will put all your details on the show notes, but if people have been really interested by what you have had to say, how could they work with you?
Our website, gocrayon.com, that has the register and you can get in contact with us there. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get in contact. I'd love to have a chat. If you're an employer thinking about your policy, we see policies from the whole spectrum, right? Of all the way from statutory to market leading, but there's a lot in between. I think that's probably a bit of a myth that it's either top of market or nothing. There's actually a full range. And we're really willing to have a chat to any employer about what parental leave support can look like and also what it can look like if you don't have a lot of budget. There's still a lot you can do that doesn't require much money.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast was funded by Works for Everyone, a business that is dedicated to supporting working parents and to smashing the motherhood penalty. If this is also your jam, let's stay connected. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for us, Works for Everyone. And if you want more information on how we help businesses put a care wrap around their employees, check us out on worksforeveryone.co.nz. Or if none of these work for you, in the weekends you can find me, Emma McLean, the founder of Works for Everyone, in the queue at Pack and Save Royal Oak or Kmart St Luke's. Onwards!